For basically all of human history, reversing aging has been pure science fiction, right? The stuff of myths. But what if I told you that right now in labs, scientists are actually pulling this idea from fiction into reality? We're not just talking about stretching out our final years, we're talking about genuinely turning back the clock. And this is so important because, as it turns out, aging itself is the single biggest risk factor for almost every major disease out there.
So let's just get right into it. The huge question here isn't really if we can fight aging anymore, it's how we're going to do it. Can we actually find a reset button buried in our own biology? Well, the answer seems to be yes, and it's coming from some absolutely groundbreaking new science. Okay, so how on earth do you even start to reverse time inside a living cell? Well, the key is this amazing process called cellular reprogramming. It uses a specific set of proteins, they're called the Yamanaka factors, to basically tell a cell's DNA, hey, remember when you were younger? Let's go back to that.
And the specific technique is called partial reprogramming. Scientists use this special recipe, a cocktail of 3 of those factors known as OSK, to wind back a cell's age. Now, how does it work? It resets what are called epigenetic markers. Just think of these markers as little sticky notes that get attached to your DNA over your life, telling your genes when to switch on or off. As we get older, those notes get messy and confusing. This process just goes in and cleans them all up, restoring a much more youthful, functional pattern.
A really good way to think about it is like defragmenting an old slow computer. Over the years, the files get all scattered and messy, and the whole system just grinds down. Partial reprogramming is like running that defrag tool. It tidies everything up, gets it running like new, but, and this is key, it doesn't delete any of your actual files. The cell stays a skin cell or a heart cell. It just acts young again.
So how did scientists put this to the test in a real live animal? They set up this brilliant 3-step experiment. First, they packed the genetic instructions for those OSK factors inside a harmless virus, an AAV. Now, that might sound a little scary, but it's actually a super common and safe way to deliver new genetic code into cells. Second, they injected this into mice that were already really old. We're talking the equivalent of an 80-year-old person. And finally, they put a special antibiotic in the mice's drinking water. This acted like an on switch, activating those age reversal genes in cycles.
And you can see exactly how it works in this diagram from the study. Over on the left, you've got the 2-part virus system being built and then injected into the mouse. The really clever bit is that one part carries the rejuvenation genes, and the other part carries the on switch. That switch only gets flipped, as you see on the right, when the mouse drinks the water with doxycycline. This gave the researchers total control over when the process started and for how long it ran. It's incredibly precise.
All right, so that's the setup. That's the theory. But did it actually work? Let's get to the results, because what they discovered was, honestly, nothing short of astonishing. 109%. That's how much the median remaining lifespan increased for the old mice that got the treatment. Now, let's be super clear about this. It didn't double their entire life from birth. It more than doubled the time they had left to live from the moment the therapy started. I mean, just imagine starting a treatment at 80 years old and being told your remaining years just more than doubled. It's wild. This survival curve really tells the whole story. See that blue line? Those are the treated mice. It stays way up high for much, much longer before it starts to drop off. The gray and black lines are the untreated mice. And that huge gap you see between the blue line and the others, that represents weeks and weeks of extra healthy life. But here is the most important part. It wasn't just about living longer. It was about living healthier. Over on the right, you're looking at something called the frailty index. It's basically a score for overall health and vigor. And look at that. The treated mice had way lower frailty scores. They weren't just old mice clinging to life. They were acting and functioning like much younger, healthier animals. And here, right here, is the molecular proof, the smoking gun. Scientists used this amazing tool called an epigenetic clock. It analyzes those little chemical tags on DNA we talked about to figure out a tissue's true biological age, which can be totally different from its age in years. And as you can see from these charts, the heart and liver tissues from the treated mice weren't just healthier, they were measurably biologically younger than the untreated mice. This is it. This is proof of reversal. Now, as incredible as this one study is, it's really important to know that it's not happening in a vacuum. To really get the full picture, we have to see how it connects to the much bigger world of regenerative medicine and, figure out how we get from a mouse in a lab to an actual therapy for people.
And this timeline shows that we are already on that path. The exact same Yamanaka factors that were used in this study have been used for years to create something called iPSCs, or induced pluripotent stem cells. And as you can see, scientists have been using those cells to grow new retinal tissue for patients with age-related blindness in clinical trials since 2014. So the core technology is already being tested in people. Now, a systemic, whole-body therapy like the one in mice is a much bigger challenge for sure, but the foundation is there.
So we've got the biological proof that this can work. But how do we get from a single lab experiment to a medicine that can help millions? I mean, the traditional way takes decades and billions of dollars. But now, a hugely powerful new player is stepping into the ring: artificial intelligence.
This quote from the chief AI officer at the pharma giant Eli Lilly just says it all. AI isn't just a fancy calculator anymore. It's becoming a genuine partner in science, one that can come up with its own ideas and see patterns that no human ever could.
I mean, just look at this comparison. The old way is slow, expensive trial and error. The new AI way can analyze data on a scale that is just impossible for humans. But here's the real magic. It learns from all the experiments that failed. In science, a failed experiment usually just gets tossed in a drawer. An AI can look at millions of those failures all at once to find hidden patterns, essentially learning what not to do, which is just as valuable as learning what works.
And trust me, this is not just talk. Eli Lilly is building one of the most powerful supercomputers in the world for this exact purpose. They're feeding it decades of their own private research data to train what they call graduate-level AI models. The goal here is to discover completely new kinds of medicines, new molecules that we couldn't even dream of with our old methods.
So let's just step back and put these two incredible stories together. On one side, we have a biological breakthrough proving that reversing age is actually possible, and on the other, we have a technological revolution that can put the search for new therapies into hyperdrive.
Of course, we have to keep our feet on the ground. This isn't happening tomorrow. As Lilly's CIO points out here, even with AI speeding up discovery, biology itself still moves at its own pace. Clinical trials are a long, careful process for a reason, so the first medicines to come out of this new approach probably won't be ready until the 2030s at the absolute earliest. So here's the bottom line. This is the big takeaway. For the very first time in human history, the two essential pieces of the puzzle are finally on the table. We have concrete scientific proof that we can reverse the aging process in a mammal, and we simultaneously have the technology to turbocharge the journey from that discovery to a real-world treatment.
And that leaves us with one last really big question. We've spent all this time on the how, on the science, but this new reality forces us to think about, well, what's next? If our lifespan becomes less of a biological inevitability and more of a personal choice, what are we all going to do with that extra healthy time?